The White House's effort to get its travel ban reinstated has been denied by a federal appeals judge. Late last night, the Justice Department filed its appeal of a judge's order that blocked the refugee and immigration ban nationwide. Well, the appeal cites, quote, a basic principle that an alien seeking initial admission to the U.S. requests a privilege and has no constitutional rights regarding his application, end quote. Earlier yesterday, the government officially suspended enforcement of the ban in compliance with Judge James Robart's order. Well, that suspension sent the new administration into crisis mode, marking a setback for the White House and a legal challenge to President Trump's authority.
The executive order that he put into effect was legal, it was appropriate, and our administration is going to be using all legal means at our disposal to challenge the judge's order.
My question to you is,
as the Trump administration worked to reinstate the ban, Trump mocked Judge Robart as a so-called judge whose, quote, ridiculous ruling will be overturned, end quote. But again, that motion has been denied. It stays within this Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. Some analysts say it could go up to the Supreme Court.
Could. This back and forth through the courts is shaping up to be a legal showdown, and the Trump administration is not showing any signs of giving up.
Epic showdown. We're now joined by ABC News political analyst Matthew Dow for some insight. Just another, mundane week of this new administration. What is your read on this? How, as I said, epic a showdown is this between the executive branch and the judicial branch?
Well, I know we've used this term so much; it's highly unusual.
Yes.
In this, we had an unprecedented election. This is an unprecedented time. I don't recall any time this early in a presidency where this confrontation took place. Between what the president thinks is the constitutional authority that he has and the judiciary now thinks. And this judge in Seattle obviously made a decision that he didn't believe that the president had the authority to do that, or believed that when the case was actually going to get decided, that the president was likely to lose. And so now we're in this situation where it's a high-speed affair. Briefs are being filed today and tomorrow. The Court of Appeals will make probably a final decision tomorrow night or Tuesday. And the Supreme Court could get involved very quickly.
So literally what's happening overseas? What has been the message to people sitting in airports or near airports who have been sort of on hold? What is the message to them right now?
Well, this is like spring break, being told you can come home, you can't come home, you can come home, you can't come home. It's a huge problem for a lot of different reasons. One is that there's all these people now are going to be on the queue to come in as quickly as possible. So they're being told, get in now, because you may not be able to come in on Tuesday or Wednesday or Thursday. So there's this whole lineup on a queue on this. The other thing is all these countries that have pointed to the efficiency of the United States of America, and they know what they're doing, and this is it, and things may not run as well in other countries, but they sure as heck run well in the United States of America. People are questioning that now.
There's a sense of chaos out there about where this ends up. I'm also fascinated by some of the political backstory, all of this. The judge in Seattle who stopped this was a George W. Bush appointee. If for some reason this does get to the Ninth Circuit, which it is now obviously, that tends to lean liberal. So again, politics does infiltrate everything. How do you see that going forward?
Well, you're right to point this out. So the judge in Seattle was appointed by Bush and was approved 99-0 in the United States Senate, overwhelmingly by Republicans and Democrats. In that he's a conservative constitutionalist. That's who he is. On the Court of Appeals, it depends on the wheel. It depends on, so you have a certain number of judges that will get picked, but it's usually at random that'll do a smaller embankment. So it could be more conservatives, it could be more progressive, more liberals in this. But I think ultimately, whoever loses in at that mode next week, it's going to the Supreme Court, where, as you know, it's a 4-4 tie right now.
And again,
so then what happens?
That's interesting, because if it's a 4-4 split, the lower court's ruling stands, which means what the Ninth Circuit tends to be liberal circuit that would stand if the court splits 4-4.
And you add, yes, and then you add in the question is how quickly the new nominee, the new Supreme Court nominee, will get on the court, because if the new Supreme Court nominee gets on the court, he could actually be in the middle of that decision-making process. I don't think this is a decision on the current court of 8, if you look at who they are and look at their history, that it will be 4-4. I think there's enough judges on the current Supreme Court that will look at this, and they'll really judge it from a constitutional standpoint, not a partisan standpoint. I wouldn't line it up Democrats versus Republicans. I would line it up who actually you believe is going to decide on the constitutional basis of it.
By the letter.
Yeah.
One last thing. The tweets by the President of the United States are being brought to bear in this legal back and forth? How so?
Well, because here's the situation. Well, anything the president speaks, and this is one thing that's different than the campaign, becomes part of a presidential record. So this is a formal part of the presidential record. The things that he tweets at 5 o'clock in the morning or 4:30 in the morning are all part of that. How so is that during the campaign, the president talked about a Muslim ban. Right, and then in the aftermath of becoming president, he said, "Well, I'm not doing a Muslim ban. I'm just banning from these 7 countries who happen to be 90% Muslim." In that, the things that he's tweeted over the last 48 hours, where he keeps mentioning ban, when his press secretary and other people in the White House keep saying it's not a ban, but the President of the United States in his Twitter feed has said ban over the last 24 hours 3 different times. That's going to be part of the record, and that will be part of the presentation to the Court of Appeals.
So you can't separate the black and white of the executive order from the tone that the president has set around the order through his social media outlets. Well, can you legally separate that?
Well, I think they're going to try, but I think judges always look at the totality of what's being decided in this. I think that before, when people said, "Well, just ignore what President Trump is tweeting," right, or candidate Trump is tweeting, you can no longer ignore it because he's president of the United States. And as I say, it's part of the presidential record.
Part of the record. Interesting. Fascinating, really. First time.
Amazing that we're having this kind